Greetings, friends. My name is Pavel Shtermach, and I'm glad to present for you the new episode of our daily wrap-up series. I would like to start today's issue with Memorial Day of defenders of Donetsk airport. The Ukrainian military defended their positions near the airfield for 242 days, and left them only because of the meanness of the Russians. They said they would take the bodies of their soldiers, but instead they mined the building and blew it up. It is not for nothing that the slogan of the memory is "People endured, concrete did not endure." So today, on the day of remembrance of the defenders of Donetsk airport, I would like to talk about the so-called successes of the Russian army. That is, the Russians tried to capture one building for almost 8 months, and with such experience in 2014, they planned to capture Kiev within 3 days. And also, I have a simple question for the Russian military leadership. Do you think that we will not defend every meter of our land? That we will not so easily give up Bakhmut, Soledar, or another our city? Just imagine if our soldiers stood in one building for 242 days, how much time you will need to capture Bakhmut, where 60,000 people lived before the war. You have been there for almost 8 months trying to capture the city. During this time, the armed forces of Ukraine recaptured Kharkiv region, the right bank of the Dnipro in Kherson region, and you still can't capture Bakhmut. Probably the most stubborn ones realized that there was no chance there and switched to the smaller Soledar. You wiped off the city of the first of the ace and still can't capture it in any way.
The battle for Soledar, for Bakhmut, for the whole Donetsk region, for the Luhansk region continues without any respite, without any stop. I am grateful to each of our fighters, each of our soldiers, sergeants, officers who understand how important it is to destroy the invaders in this direction. Russia has made the battle for the cities of our Donbass fundamental for itself. Our heroes make this battle fundamental for the destruction of the combat potential of the terrorist state.
I don't know what word Ukrainian defenders will be called after the end of this war. Well, they are cats for us, because they are gentle, handsome and purring, and with claws. And the defenders of the Donetsk airport will always be cyborgs. For us, because only man of steel could withstand that onslaught and those battles. By the way, even the name cyborgs was invented by the Russians. That's how they wanted to explain why armed pro-Russian fighters and disguised Russian military personnel could not break the resistance of the defenders of the airport. But as we can see now, our indomitability has become even greater and in any case will withstand all the Russian onslaught. Our cyborgs continue to protect our land. They were among the first to go out to meet the enemy on February the 24th. They are the steeliest people. Russia does not want to protect Russian speakers, they want to limit their freedom. As the Kremlin has repeatedly stated, one of the reasons why Russia began the full-scale aggression against Ukraine was to protect the Russian-speaking population. But this is not true in this case. They just want more people in their country. A country without rights and freedoms, and where the great Tsar or General Secretary or President manages all affairs in the country. And this is exactly the order of things they want to impose on everyone around them.
Russia was not going to invade Ukraine to protect the Russian speakers. They instead planned to invade to limit them, because Russian speakers in Ukraine are a problem for Russia itself. Timothy Snyder, historian, in an interview for Foreign Affairs.
I will try to explain a little. Due to long-term policy of reunification, Moscow and St. Petersburg achieved the fact that a large part of Ukrainians spoke Russian. Nowadays, this percentage is much smaller, and yet, no matter what language people speak, they remain Ukrainians. And it turned out that Russian-speaking people cannot be submissive, as in the Russian Federation, but go out to protest and defend their rights. And sooner or later such personal qualities could spill over into Russia, and then one person could not be in power for 23 years. Let's hope that this political hegemony in Russia will end this year. And we, Ukrainians, are by nature Democrats and Europeans. We are one of the few countries that were formed after the collapse of the USSR, where presidents changed. Sometimes because of revolutions, more often because of ordinary democratic elections. But in our country, the people decide who and how to lead them, and not one person or group decides how to lead the people.
Putin абсолютный как бы покойник.
Putin is a political dead man. He has nothing to lose anyway. The claims will be primarily against him. In general, he is already hated by everyone, despised, non-shaken hands. No one will sit down at the negotiation table with him. All these talks about negotiations with Putin, this will never happen. Putin played all in, and how he has a poker game where he plans to either win everything or lose everything.
And you know what's interesting? Putin decided that it was worth attacking Ukraine, and everybody, the whole country, all the officials, the military, and after September, civilians also started working on the war. What's more, ordinary people now support the attack on Ukraine. Russians believe that they bring something good for us. However, when tanks and armored vehicles arrived in our settlements, Russian soldiers were shocked. After all, we, ordinary Ukrainians, live much better than Russians somewhere outside Moscow or St. Petersburg. We have asphalt on the roads, we have utilities in the premises, gas, water and sewage. And in Russia, despite the fact that they position themselves as a great country, there are no banal goods. I was personally impressed by the information from the city of Murmansk. There is a nuclear submarine fleet in which hundreds of millions of dollars are invested, and people in the city in apartment buildings do not have regular sewage. That is, the atomic fleet and a cesspool are nearby. So when they do, the Russians want to bring us. And why did they decide to attack us?
It is ridiculous to say that there is any reason for Russia to invade Ukraine. There is no NATO when Russia invaded in 2014. Then we didn't talk about NATO at all. Yes, we argued in theoretical models because Ukraine needed some kind of collective security agreement. Russia does not guarantee anything, etc. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine, none of this mattered. Hatred for Ukraine, exclusive hatred, the desire to dominate the region and the desire to destroy and bring to their knees the people who have always looked skeptically towards Russia.
But as always in Russia, everything is not as planned. During the year, the number of Russian-speaking Ukrainians decreased by 10%, and it will continue to decrease because we want to have less and less in common with Russians. Ukraine is a de facto member of NATO. This was stated by the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Alexei Reznikov, in an interview with the BBC. And it is difficult to argue with this in modern conditions. Referring to one of his colleagues, Reznikov noted that NATO takes into account that the main threat to the alliance is the Russian Federation for the next 10 years, and therefore Ukraine can be, and in my opinion should be, one of the countries of the alliance.
One of my colleagues, the Minister of Defense, frankly said during a meeting in Brussels that NATO strategy for the next 10 years takes into account that the main threat to the alliance is the Russian Federation. And he also explained that there is only one army in the world that has the experience of how to defeat the Russians, how to fight the Russians, and how to knock them out of their territory. This is the Ukrainian army. Alexei Reznikov, Minister of Defense of Ukraine, in an interview with the BBC.
In addition, all military experts admit that Ukrainians can quickly learn to use modern weapons, and we will gradually use it to protect our country, especially since the Ukrainians are already studying the Patriot system. They will soon receive Marder and Bradley fighting vehicles and Leopard 2 tanks. All this, in the skillful hands of Ukrainian soldiers, will not change the course of the events on the battlefield. No, everything has already changed. We just need to speed it up, especially since the perception is changing in Europe nowadays. Until recently, the West feared that any tanks transferred to Ukraine would cause an escalation. But according to Reznikov, we will receive tanks, fighter airplanes and weapons with a range of 300 kilometers, and Russia will not respond to this.
There is a war in my country. What could escalate further? They attacked our cities, our hospitals, our kindergartens, our schools. They killed civilians, children. This is an army of murderers, rapists and marauders. What else could be the level of escalation? They are here in my country. Alexei Reznikov, Minister of Defense of Ukraine, in an interview with the BBC.
However, non-Ukrainian residents may naturally be wary of escalation spreading to their territory, and I believe that currently no expert can assure that this will not happen. After all, until February the 24th, few people even in Ukraine believed that Russia could go full escalation against a sovereign state. but in their heads such a thing is happening that is impossible to guess the thoughts. So now even the USA is transferring its equipment to Europe. On Wednesday, a huge number of tanks and other equipment arrived in the Netherlands, as reported by Reuters. All this equipment will be sent to Lithuania and Poland to strengthen NATO's eastern flank.
What is happening now is something new. Until this phase of strengthening NATO eastern flank, someone could confidently say that Putin is just playing with words, and there is a certain red line associated with the fact that NATO does not involve troops on the territory of Ukraine, on the side of Ukraine, until Putin uses weapons of mass destruction. And accordingly, as long as Putin does not use weapons of mass destruction, NATO troops do not directly participate in the war on the territory of Ukraine, on the side of Ukraine. But what is happening now, it seems to me, is preparation for some new stage where the involvement of our partners can be much deeper. But I think that NATO is preparing for such large-scale events suggests that they are not afraid that Putin will make some crazy steps.
However, not only NATO member states are currently helping Ukraine. The 50 participants in the Ramstein defense conferences are not all part of the alliance, but everyone helps us. Everyone do what they can. And we hope that during the next meeting this Friday, there will be even more military aid for Ukraine. That concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for future videos. Subscribe to UATV English and goodbye.